China's influence in the G20 goes far beyond its ties with just Argentina. As the world's largest exporter, it plays a major business role with all of the G20 economies. China's economy ranks second worldwide in total GDP, totaling $12 trillion. And President Xi Jinping has hinted at expanding China's foreign investment just days before the summit. China last held the G20 presidency in 2016, hosting the Hangzhou Summit. Joined now by Robert Moran. He's a partner in the Brunswick Group. That's a public opinion and market research company. Last year's summit was in Hamburg, and after it concluded, Roberto Castaldi, who's research director of the International Center for European and Global Governance, said this. In the past, the U.S. provided leadership and impetus. This is not the case anymore. They are rather an obstacle to tackle global problems effectively. As an example, the withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. There is no alternative leadership so far. This makes it more difficult to get significant decisions. If that's the case, what can we expect? And if there is a leadership vacuum, who's filling it?
It's an interesting question. I mean, the reason why it's the G20 now is a realization back during the Bush era that we are in a multipolar world with many players, and we can't achieve a solution with a small number of world powers. We need a much larger number of world powers. So I think that's part of the G20, in fact, is that the United States cannot make all these decisions or push one agenda itself. G20 is going to focus on three things from everything we know. The first is workforce of the future, which is questions about automation in the future and what will the workforce look like. The second is about infrastructure supporting sustainable development and the 100 trillion we need by 2030 for infrastructure all around the world. And the third is about food security, which is actually a very big issue that the media doesn't talk about as much, and how you double production in a relatively short period of time to feed the planet.
It's critically important.
Those are some big issues, and I'm optimistic that those three issues can actually be addressed, especially, I think, the second and third.
Interesting, the third with overpopulation. That's a tough one. That's a tough nut to crack. Let me ask you about Trump and Putin. There's talk on again, off again. Of course, in Hamburg, that was the first time they actually got together. Of course, we saw the other meeting in Finland. What do we expect from this one?
Well, the question right now is there going to be a meeting? I think the answer is yes. I think most people realize their engagement is critically important. World leaders need to speak to each other and to have that discussion. I would expect it to be somewhat frosty discussion at this point, given everything that's going on, especially in Ukraine at the moment, and how that challenges our European allies. But I think the meeting happens.
And of course, the other meeting, of course, will be this dinner between President Xi and President Trump. I see you shaking your head. That's the one everybody's going to be watching. Yes. That's on Saturday. What do you expect from it?
Well, we've been in the world of conjecture around the president now for a while, and we've been wrong and we've been right. If history is any guide, there'll be a lot of kind words spoken about the meeting for maybe 24 hours afterwards, and then there'll be tweets about trade, and we'll be right back to where we are, sort of with tweets and allegations flying. I think it's good that these two world leaders sit down and talk about this. I think there's an open question about which country can just take more pain.
And what's the answer to that?
I don't know. I don't think anybody knows exactly.
And let's take it beyond which one of these countries can take more pain. There's been a lot of people talking about these are the two largest economies. Right. What does it do to the global economy?
Right. And I think that's what's on the mind of the other players. So everything you've been reading in the news and everything that's being signaled is the rest of the world would like the U.S. and China to take a quote-unquote timeout from the trade war, because if the U.S. and China continue on the path of a trade war, they may get a cold, but the rest of the world gets the flu, right? And it slows down world trade. The people in that room represent something like 85% of the world's GDP and 75% of the world's trade. These are all the major players. It's in no one's best interest to have a big trade war between the U.S. and China because it dislocates everything else. There has been discussion about whether this might help a country like Brazil by reorienting some of their agricultural output towards the Pacific Rim. We don't know. It seems risky. The knock-on effects of all of this trade war back and forth have not appeared to be very good for American farmers, for apparently American auto workers, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And
We're seeing
continues.
examples. We're seeing examples of both of those. Robert,
Right.
always a pleasure. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.